Howard Schultz's story begins in Brooklyn, New York, in 1953, long before the world knew him as the man behind Starbucks. He was born into a family that struggled with poverty every day. His father, Fred, was a hard-working but unlucky man. Over the years, Fred worked as a truck driver, factory laborer, and deliveryman, but none of his jobs provided stability or benefits. His mother, Elaine, cared for Howard and his siblings, doing everything she could to stretch the family's meager income. They lived in the Bayview housing projects in Canarsie, a tough environment where broken elevators, graffiti, and crime were part of daily life. Howard often said that growing up there shaped his toughness and resilience. He had to learn early that life wasn't fair, but that didn't mean he couldn't rise above it. A defining moment came when his father slipped on ice and broke his ankle while working. Without health insurance, the family fell into deeper financial hardship. Howard watched his father's pride collapse as he sat at home, unable to provide. The image of his father's hopelessness stayed with him forever. That day, Howard silently promised himself that if he ever built a company, it would treat workers with respect and dignity, unlike the world that had abandoned his father. Howard found an escape in sports. He played basketball and football with intensity, finding confidence on the court that he couldn't find in the classroom. Sports gave him structure, discipline, and a taste of victory. Off the court, he worked odd jobs selling newspapers, waiting tables, washing dishes, even working in a fur shop to help his family and buy his own clothes. He learned early that survival required grit. Still, Howard dreamed big. Poverty was his reality, not his destiny. His mother pushed him toward education, telling him it was his ticket out of the projects. He clung to that belief, determined to make something of himself. The fire that would one day fuel Starbucks was already burning inside him. It was lit by hardship, fueled by his father's suffering, and sustained by a relentless refusal to quit. Howard's athletic ability became his escape route. At Canarsie High School, he earned a football scholarship to Northern Michigan University. For the first time in his life, he left Brooklyn behind. When he arrived in Michigan, he felt like an outsider. Many of his classmates came from middle-class or wealthy families, while Howard carried the weight of poverty with him. But he refused to be intimidated. At Northern Michigan, Howard majored in communications. Sports had given him discipline, but it was in classrooms and small jobs that he discovered his love for connecting with people. He worked as a bartender, tended to ski lodges, and even sold blood to make ends meet. Life was not glamorous, but every hardship only strengthened his resolve. Graduating in 1975 was a proud moment. He was the first in his family to earn a college degree. Armed with determination, he returned to New York City, eager to build a career. He joined Xerox as a salesman, a job that gave him solid training in sales and marketing. Xerox was known for its tough sales program, and Howard thrived in it. He learned how to pitch, how to listen to customers, and how to close deals. But inside, he knew he didn't want to spend his life climbing someone else's corporate ladder. After Xerox, he joined Hammerplast, a Swedish company that sold household products, including coffee makers. It was here that fate stepped in. While reviewing sales data, Howard noticed that a small company in Seattle, Starbucks, was ordering an unusually high number of drip coffee machines. Curious, he decided to investigate. In 1981, Howard flew to Seattle to meet the founders of Starbucks. At that time, Starbucks wasn't the global giant it would become. It was a tiny company with just a few stores, selling roasted coffee beans and brewing equipment. But when Howard walked into their shop, he was struck by the aroma, the passion, and the knowledge of the people behind the counter. This wasn't just about coffee, it was about craftsmanship and quality. Howard met Jerry Baldwin, Zev Siegel, and Gordon Bowker, the founders of Starbucks. Their mission was simple: sell the best coffee beans in the world, educate customers, and never compromise on quality. For Howard, it was love at first sight. He felt he had found something that resonated with his own values: authenticity, connection, and passion. Back in New York, Howard couldn't stop thinking about Starbucks. He knew he wanted to be part of it. A year later, in 1982, he joined Starbucks as Director of Retail Operations and Marketing. For many, it seemed like a strange decision to leave a stable job at a growing company for a small coffee retailer in Seattle. But Howard trusted his gut. At Starbucks, he threw himself into the work, building systems, marketing strategies, and growth plans. But what really changed everything for him was a business trip to Milan, Italy, in 1983. There, he discovered the Italian espresso bar culture. Cafes weren't just about coffee, they were social hubs, third places where people gathered between home and work. He saw warmth, community, and ritual in every cup. Howard immediately thought, this is what America needs. Starbucks could become more than a coffee store, it could become a place where people connect. But when he shared his vision with the Starbucks founders, they weren't convinced. They saw themselves as purists, dedicated to beans and equipment, not as cafe operators. Howard was disappointed but not defeated. Deep inside, he knew this idea was too powerful to ignore. In 1983, Howard Schultz traveled to Milan, Italy, on a buying trip for Starbucks. What he experienced there would change his life forever. Walking through the streets of Milan, he was captivated not just by the espresso itself, but by the culture surrounding it. Coffee houses weren't just places to grab a drink, they were social institutions. People met friends, had conversations, built relationships, and took time to save a life. Each cafe was full of warmth and community, a third place between home and work. Howard noticed the artistry of the baristas and the pride they took in crafting espresso. He watched as customers were greeted by name, their preferences remembered, and conversations flowing freely. It wasn't about caffeine, it was about human connection. For a boy who grew up in the cold stairwells of Brooklyn housing projects, this vision of belonging struck a deep chord. Returning to Seattle, Howard was energized with an idea: Starbucks could be more than a store selling beans. It could bring this Italian cafe culture to America. Starbucks could become a place where people felt valued, a space where human connection was as important as the coffee itself. But when Howard pitched the concept to Starbucks founders, they pushed back. Jerry Baldwin and the others insisted that Starbucks' identity was in selling whole beans and equipment, not running cafes. They were coffee purists, uninterested in becoming a restaurant chain. Howard felt crushed. He knew in his heart this idea could revolutionize America, but his bosses couldn't see it. The rejection didn't stop him. If Starbucks wouldn't take the leap, Howard decided he would do it himself. It was a risky move, he had little money, a young family to support, and no guarantees. But his vision was too powerful to ignore. Sometimes destiny requires bold steps, and Howard was ready to risk everything. In 1985, Howard left Starbucks to start his own coffee company, inspired by the Italian model. He named it Illinois Journal, after an Italian newspaper, symbolizing the sense of community he wanted to create. But starting a business wasn't easy. Howard faced rejection after rejection as he tried to raise money. Many investors laughed at the idea. Americans don't drink espresso, they told him. Stick to selling beans. Still, Howard persisted. He knocked on doors, pitched to anyone who would listen, and shared his vision with unshakable passion. Slowly, he raised $1.7 million from about 200 small investors, many of whom were impressed more by his determination than the concept itself. Illinois Journal opened in April 1986 in downtown Seattle. Howard insisted on authenticity, standing room only, Italian music in the background, baristas in crisp white shirts, and perfectly crafted espresso. He wanted customers to feel transported, as if they had stepped into Milan. To his joy, people loved it. The cafe was busy from day one, not just because of the coffee, but because of the atmosphere. It felt fresh, exciting, and different. Encouraged by the success, Howard opened more locations. The idea was working. But fate had another twist in store. In 1987, the founders of Starbucks decided to sell their company. Starbucks had 6 stores and a small roasting operation at the time. They offered Howard the chance to buy it, but he didn't have the money. Howard refused to let the opportunity slip away. He returned to the investors who had once backed Illinois Journal, and this time, his passion carried even more weight. He convinced them to support him again. With their help, he raised the necessary $3.8 million. In August 1987, Howard bought Starbucks. Illinois Journal merged with it, and Howard Schultz became the CEO. His dream was no longer just an idea, it was reality. He now had the brand, the infrastructure, and, most importantly, the chance to transform Starbucks into the cafe culture he had envisioned since Milan. Owning Starbucks was both thrilling and terrifying. Howard had risked everything, and failure would mean losing not just money but his reputation and dream. But he poured his heart into the company. From day one, he was determined to create a business that treated employees, whom he called partners, with dignity. Remembering his father's struggles, he introduced health benefits for part-time workers, something unheard of at the time. Later, he even gave employees stock options, allowing them to share in the company's growth. In the early years, growth was steady but careful. Starbucks expanded across Seattle and into other cities. Every detail mattered, from the layout of the stores to the music playing in the background. Howard wanted consistency, but also soul. Starbucks wasn't just about coffee, it was about creating experiences. By the early 1990s, Starbucks had grown to over 100 stores. In 1992, the company went public, raising money for further expansion. The IPO was a success, and Starbucks stock soared. Suddenly, Howard Schultz, once a boy from Brooklyn's housing projects, was the CEO of a publicly traded company. But growth came with challenges. Many critics doubted Starbucks could expand nationwide. Others worried the brand would lose its authenticity as it grew. Howard wrestled with these fears himself. He was determined to scale without losing the heart of the company, the human connection that had inspired him in Italy. Through it all, Howard stayed true to his vision. He believed Starbucks could transform the way America experienced coffee and community. Each new store was another chance to create a third place, a gathering spot that was neither home nor office, but something in between, a place where everyone belonged. By the mid-1990s, Starbucks had become a cultural phenomenon. From New York to Chicago to Los Angeles, people lined up not just for coffee, but for the experience. Howard's dream had taken root. Starbucks wasn't just expanding, it was reshaping daily life in America. By the late 1990s, Starbucks was no longer just a Seattle-based chain, it was becoming a worldwide brand. Howard Schultz had a vision not just for America but for the globe. He believed coffee was universal, and that Starbucks could become a bridge between cultures. The first step came in 1996 when Starbucks opened its first international store in Tokyo, Japan. Critics doubted whether the American coffee culture would appeal to the Japanese, who had their own deep traditions with tea. But to Howard's delight, the store was an immediate success. Customers lined up out the door, eager to experience the Starbucks way. The success in Tokyo proved that Starbucks could work beyond US borders. From there, expansion accelerated. Stores opened in China, the Middle East, and Europe. Each market brought new challenges, different tastes, cultural norms, and competition. But Howard insisted on adapting without losing Starbucks' essence. In China, for example, Starbucks offered larger seating areas, catering to the culture of socializing in groups. In Europe, it respected local coffee traditions while introducing its own flavors. At home, Starbucks became a cultural icon. Coffee wasn't just a drink anymore, it was an experience. People began carrying Starbucks cups like fashion accessories. Words like latte, cappuccino, and macchiato became part of everyday vocabulary. Starbucks turned coffee into a lifestyle, a daily ritual. By the early 2000s, Starbucks had more than 5,000 stores worldwide. Howard Schultz was hailed as a visionary who had not only built a company but reshaped culture. Yet, behind the success, challenges were brewing. Rapid growth carried risks, and not everyone welcomed Starbucks' dominance. Some critics accused the company of driving out small cafes and over-commercializing coffee. Howard faced a new challenge. Could Starbucks grow without losing its soul? As Starbucks expanded, cracks began to appear. The company was growing so fast that some stores felt rushed and impersonal. What Howard had once envisioned as warm, community-driven spaces sometimes became cookie-cutter outlets focused on speed and profit. Customers and employees began to notice. By 2007, Starbucks had over 15,000 stores worldwide, but the magic was fading. The company's stock plummeted as profits fell. The financial crisis of 2008 made things worse. People were cutting back on luxuries, and Starbucks, once seen as an affordable indulgence, was now criticized as overpriced. Howard, who had stepped down as CEO in 2000 to focus on broader company strategy, watched in dismay. Starbucks was losing its identity. The very thing he had fought for, the human connection, was slipping away under the weight of expansion. In January 2008, Howard returned as CEO. It was one of the toughest moments of his career. Starbucks had closed hundreds of stores, laid off thousands of employees, and lost the trust of investors. For Howard, it felt like going back to the projects in Brooklyn, facing hardship head-on. He made bold moves. Howard shut down every Starbucks store in America for a day to retrain baristas, sending a powerful message: quality mattered more than profit. He reintroduced the idea of coffee as an art form, not just a commodity. He streamlined menus, invested in digital innovation, and emphasized values again: respect, connection, and community. Slowly, Starbucks began to recover. The stock rose, customer trust returned, and Starbucks rediscovered its purpose. It was a reminder that even the most successful companies must stay true to their roots. For Howard, it reinforced a lifelong belief: you can't sacrifice soul for growth. One of the defining features of Howard Schultz's leadership was his commitment to people. From the beginning, he wanted Starbucks to be different, to treat employees not as disposable labor, but as partners. Inspired by his father's struggles, he made sure part-timers received health benefits and stock options. Over the years, Howard expanded Starbucks' social mission. The company supported ethical coffee sourcing through fair trade practices, ensuring farmers were treated fairly. Starbucks also invested in sustainability, reducing waste and promoting environmentally friendly practices. Howard also used Starbucks as a platform for social change. The company supported programs for veterans, refugees, and underprivileged youth. Howard believed businesses had a responsibility to do more than make money; they had to make a difference. His leadership style was personal and emotional. He wasn't a distant CEO locked in an office. He connected with employees, shared stories, and inspired loyalty. He was known for saying, "We're not in the coffee business serving people. We're in the people business serving coffee." Howard became a symbol of the American dream, a boy from Brooklyn's housing projects who built one of the world's most recognizable brands. His story inspired countless entrepreneurs, showing that vision and persistence can overcome even the harshest beginnings. By the time Howard Schultz stepped down from his role at Starbucks in 2018, The company had over 30,000 stores in more than 70 countries. Starbucks had become not just a brand but a global community, woven into the daily routines of millions of people. Howard's legacy wasn't just about coffee. It was about creating spaces of connection in an increasingly fragmented world. He had proven that business could be both profitable and compassionate. For him, Starbucks was never only about selling lattes, it was about dignity, respect, and belonging. Beyond business, Howard's journey remains a story of resilience. From a childhood defined by poverty and pain, he rose to unimaginable success, driven by a promise he made as a boy to build a life different from his father's and to treat people with fairness. Today, Howard Schultz is remembered as more than the man who built Starbucks. He is a visionary who proved that dreams can grow even in the harshest soil. His life stands as a reminder: success isn't just about money or fame. True success is about impact, about how you use your struggles to create something better, not only for yourself but for the world around you. For anyone who has ever felt trapped by circumstance, Howard Schultz's journey carries a simple, powerful message: your beginnings don't define your future. With courage, vision, and heart, you can build something extraordinary.